Okay, well, good evening, everyone. I declare open this meeting of the Senate Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade Legislation Committee. I want to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to their elders past and present. The Senate has referred to the committee the particulars of the proposed expenditure for the year 2025-26 and other related documents for the Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade portfolios. The committee may also examine the annual reports of the departments and agencies appearing before it. The committee is due to report to the Senate on the 31st of March this year. The committee has set the 13th of March as the deadline for senators to submit written questions or notice for the purpose of this hearing. The committee has also set the 24th of April as the date for the return of answers to questions taken on notice for the purpose of this hearing. Under Standing Order 26, the committee must take all evidence in public session, and this includes answers to questions on notice. I remind all witnesses that in giving evidence to the committee, they are protected by parliamentary privilege. It is unlawful for anyone to threaten or disadvantage a witness on account of evidence given to a committee, and such action may be treated by the Senate as contempt. It's also contempt to give false or misleading evidence. The Senate has endorsed the following test of relevance of questions at estimates hearings. Any questions going to the operations or financial positions of the departments and agencies which are seeking funds in the estimates are relevant questions for the purpose of estimates hearings. I remind officers that the Senate has resolved that there are no areas in connection with the expenditure of public funds where any person has a discretion to withhold details or explanations from the Parliament or its committees unless the Parliament has expressly provided otherwise. The Senate has resolved that an officer of a department of the Commonwealth shall not be asked to give opinions on matters of policy and shall be given reasonable opportunity to refer questions asked to superior officers or to a minister. This resolution prohibits only questions asking for opinions on matters of policy and does not preclude questions asking for explanations of policy or factual questions about when and how policies were adopted. I draw the attention of witnesses to an order of the Senate of the 13th of May 2009 specifying the process by which a claim of public interest immunity should be raised and which I now incorporate into the Hansard. Witnesses are specifically reminded that a statement claiming that information or a document is confidential or consists of advice to government is not a statement that meets the requirements of the 2009 order. Instead, witnesses are required to articulate the harm to the public interest that could result from the disclosure of the information or the document. An officer called upon for the first time to answer a question should state their full name and the position for the Hansard record, and witnesses should speak clearly into the microphone. Please ensure mobile phones are switched off or turned to silent. I remind senators and witnesses in the hearing room that microphones remain live unless I instruct otherwise. I remind senators of their obligations under the Behaviour Code for Australian parliamentarians to treat witnesses with dignity, courtesy, fairness and respect. And I ask members of the media to follow the established media guidelines and instructions of the committee secretariat. Now, witnesses and senators who are seeking to table documents during the committee's hearings are requested to provide an electronic copy, if you can do so, to the secretariat so we can circulate them during the hearing. On that note, I'd like to commence today's hearings and acknowledge representatives from the Department of Veterans Affairs. I welcome Senator the Honourable Jenny McAllister, who is representing the Minister for Veterans Affairs, and Ms Alison Frame, Secretary of the Department of Veterans Affairs and officers of the Department. Now, good evening, Minister. Do you have an opening statement?
No,
Ms Frame, do you have an opening statement?
I do.
Okay, and you're happy to table that at the conclusion?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. All right, you have the call.
Thank you. 2026 will be a significant year for the Department of Veterans Affairs as we continue to implement key recommendations of the Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicide. Two critical recommendations accepted by Government will become a reality from 1 July. Firstly, the Veterans Entitlements Treatment and Support Simplification and Harmonisation Act 2025 will come into force and see veterans and families of veterans able to receive the supports they need and deserve faster, leading to improved outcomes. New claims for compensation and rehabilitation received on or after 1 July will be determined under an improved version of the Military Rehabilitation and Compensation Act 2004 as the single ongoing act. This will provide a single, clearer pathway for accessing support and make it easier for veterans to understand and navigate. DVA continues to communicate extensively with the veteran community and advocate about the upcoming changes so that they are well informed and can plan for their individual circumstances. Secondly, the new Veteran and Family Wellbeing Agency will begin operation. The recent mid-year economic and fiscal outlook provided $78 million over 4 years to establish the agency, which implements Recommendation 87 of the Royal Commission's final report and provides the coordinated delivery of related recommendations 80, 81 and 86. The agency will focus on the successful transition from military to civilian life, community connection and improving wellbeing. Initially, the agency will focus on supporting at-risk veterans transitioning from the ADF with a view to expanding capability as the agency grows. These two milestones are the culmination of extensive consultative and developmental work by DVA staff, and I thank them for their extraordinary efforts as we bring these initiatives to fruition. The work also builds on the significant progress achieved in 2025 on delivering the government's response to the Royal Commission, with 32 recommendations implemented by the end of last year. The establishment of the Wellbeing Agency and other initiatives underscore a shift to a deeper focus across DVA and the entire veteran support system on the wellbeing of families and veterans and families of veterans. In MyEFO, the government provided $739.2 million over 4 years to facilitate better long-term health and wellbeing outcomes for veterans, including prioritising upfront early intervention and treatment, incentivising the provision of mental health care plans and a national PTSD treatment study. This improved access to treatment will support veterans to receive the right care as early as possible, supporting their long-term wellbeing and improving their quality of life. Claims for compensation continue to increase year on year. Claims received in the financial year to January 2026 constitute a 10% increase on the record numbers received last year. In response to this, however, DVA teams continue to make record determinations and, most importantly, the vast majority of initial liability claims are being allocated within 14 days. MERCA initial liability claims received and determined in the last 12 months took on average around 120 days to process, which means that veterans are getting access to the health services and payments they may need while follow-on claims for permanent impairment are being assessed. From next week, DVA will commence a pilot with the Queensland RSL using AI to support the preparation of summaries to assist delegates in making initial liability claims. The pilot operates on a voluntary consent basis and is subject to strict privacy and information security standards. To improve processing times for permanent impairment claims, we are in the process of bringing in additional resources to review claims and confirm if the medical reports and information on record is adequate to enable a delegate decision, and to implement an outbound call strategy to update veterans on the progress of their claims. In addition to these efforts to improve processing efficiency, DVA's work to strengthen the integrity of the veteran support system continues at pace. In MyEFO, the government provided $203.1 million over 4 years to strengthen DVA's provider integrity capability, support free veteran advocacy services, combat fraud activity and support the operations of the new Institute of Veterans Advocacy. The department stood up a new provider integrity division last December. The team is focused on detecting and addressing unethical and fraudulent practices by service providers and advocates. I put on the record that the vast majority do the right thing. However, there are those who do not, and we are committed to ensuring veterans are not exploited and their own entitlements eroded by unnecessary fees. In December 2025, the government tabled its response to the Senate inquiry into issues relating to advocacy services for veterans accessing compensation and income support, agreeing in principle to 6 of the committee's 7 recommendations. Consistent with the committee's recommendation that DVA explore potential legislative action to curb harmful and deceptive business practices in the commercial advocacy sector, which was agreed by government, public consultation is now underway on options to better protect veterans. We are also working closely with the Institute of Veterans Advocacy, which has been established as the National Professional Association for Veterans Advocates, and to set competency and training standards for the sector. I'm pleased to note the IVA recently announced it is accepting membership applications. I thank the committee and I look forward to your questions.
Thanks, Ms Frame. Now, Senator Scarr, might kick it
Yeah,
off
I've
with
got some
you.
questions.
Excellent.
Thank you, Ms Frame. I've been in contact with medical providers in my home state of Queensland, also with the AMA Queensland branch, and they've raised a number of disturbing issues with me. The first issue I want to raise with you is the department appears to have sent out letters to practice managers in relation to raising issues with respect to billing practices. But in those letters, and I've got one here, it says, if irregular or suspected fraudulent behaviour is identified, DVA will institute measures to ensure ongoing compliance, including the referral of matters to regulatory bodies and or Australian Federal Police for investigation, end quote. Can you understand how a medical practice that is dealing with your department and seeking clarification with respect to numerous matters and not getting that clarification, how aggrieved they feel when they get a letter potentially referring them to the Australian Federal Police? And do you think that's the right approach to deal with medical practitioners who in many cases are making personal sacrifices to provide medical care to our veterans?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I'll commence and then I'll hand to my colleague here, Mr Kefford, who can provide more detail. I would say that in those letters we are providing relevant information to medical professionals. We are not saying we are referring people. We are providing advice about what is available to the department, and that is obviously referring to an escalation at the end of the letter there. And I would also advise the committee tonight that we have in fact referred some medical professionals to APRA and to the AFP. So we are merely advising medical professionals that this has occurred. We're not saying to the people who receive those letters, this is happening to you. We are providing information on this is happening where we are not satisfied that processes are being followed.
Ms Frame, these are, and we'll get to the further answer, but just in relation to this is a letter to professionals who are providing a service. I put it to you that in the first instance, where you're seeking clarification, there shouldn't be any mention in a one-page letter of referrals to the Australian Federal Police. You should simply try to seek clarification in relation to matters rather than mention referrals to the police. And the impact of that letter is demonstrated through the fact that it's been raised with me by medical practitioners how aggrieved they are. Will you take it on board? Will you take on notice the fact that maybe there's a better approach to this than in initial letters referring to references to the Australian Federal Police?
Certainly I will, Senator. I would just like to also take on notice whether that letter is in fact the first letter. It may well be. I know we've sent previous letters, so I don't know if colleagues know anything more at the table. Yes, so that was something that we would have a look at that letter, Senator, and it may be that we can clarify the one you're holding up is not in fact the first letter that's gone out. Mr Kefford.
Andrew Kefford, Deputy Secretary, Policy and Programs. Senator, as the Secretary's referred to, there are a range of measures we can take when we do have concerns about the behaviour of medical providers. As was acknowledged in the opening statement, we do recognise that there are, and the majority of providers who do work with us are doing the right thing. However, as you know from evidence in other sittings of this committee, we have had concerns in recent times about the behaviour of medical providers, whether that relates to the amounts that were being charged or indeed the quantum of tests that were being ordered, and we've taken regulatory action in relation to that. I think I know, because of the way you introduced it, who you are particularly talking about. I won't name them, you haven't. But what I can say is there has been significant discussions since that letter, including as recently as in the last few weeks, certainly with the... I won't go any further identified, forgive me. Essentially our response is to say, and there's guidance in our treatment notes, in our documents for doctors engaging with our system. It's important, and it is an area where DVA has needed to be more active in recent times, that as part of that education process we say there are a range of options that we can take, up to and including the referrals that have been that have been made. Clearly, that's not our first and only response, but I think in terms of signalling the depths of concern that we have, it is important to note, as with all Commonwealth agencies, the range of options that are open to us.
Yeah, I don't think that's the most constructive approach. My next question is, does DVA pay the same fee to all providers for compensation medical assessments?
We have, in the last few weeks, Senator, published updated guidance on reasonable fees, but the fees in that context are not determined in the way that our treatment fees are.
Okay, so let me repeat the question. Does DVA pay the same fee to all providers for compensation medical assessments?
No, Senator, it's not a prescribed fee.
Why?
The statutory basis is that the department is required to pay reasonable fees. And so there has been guidance, as I say, that's been updated, but at the end of the day, that part of the system doesn't have prescribed fees in the way that the treatment part of the system does.
So why is the department paying different fees for compensation medical assessments undertaken by different providers?
Well, in a sense, Senator, we're paying the bills that are presented along with the claims. It's our obligation under the Act to pay those.
Sorry, Mr Kifford. Why are you using differential fee? Why are you paying fees on a differential basis? Paying different providers different fees for providing compensation medical assessment?
Well, Senator, as I've described, they're not prescribed fees, and so...
I didn't say they were. I said you're paying different fees for compensation medical assessments, yes, undertaken by different providers, correct?
That's correct.
Why?
That's been a feature of our system for some time, Senator. I've explained the basis on which we do it.
I'm sorry, you haven't explained the basis on which you do it. You've told me, and with respect, saying it's been the feature of the system for some time is probably the worst possible explanation I could receive. The question I have, and this has been raised by the Australian Medical Association of Queensland, that the department is providing different providers different fees for compensation medical assessments, and I'm asking why.
Senator, if I could just add, Mr Kefford has referred to the very recent guidance we put out to try and address that issue and provide some range from the department or a guidance on fees about what the department considers to be a fair price for a compensation assessment, but where assessors, medical professionals, are able to demonstrate and provide to the department evidence of a more complex assessment or whatever additional measures they have undertaken in completing an assessment, then the department looks at that information and has the ability to pay above that guidance if that is demonstrated to be a legitimate claim.
Senator Luke Brown, First Assistant Secretary, Policy and Research Division. I'd have to look at these specific examples that are being raised with you, but we do pay a differential based on a short consultation, a long consultation, and per page for a report. So some of the differences in the amounts we're paying to providers might be due to the structure of the guidance that we put out as well.
Well, I've been told, and this is by people who are actually providing these services, that particular large providers are being paid more for doing this work than smaller providers under contracts that have been entered into with the large providers. Is that the case?
There's no contracts for compensation assessment, Senator. Apart from the MILCOA, which is the one that the department has.
Right.
But veterans can go to whomever doctor they want to. Senator, we don't have multiple contracts for compensation assessment providers. We have one contract with MILCOA for independent medical examinations, which are, my colleagues here can tell you about the circumstances in which they are used, but the vast majority of compensation assessments, Senator, are undertaken by any medical professionals who complete those assessments. They are not under contract to the department.
So, Ms Frame, you're not aware of the concern amongst providers of these important services that their clients, in many cases clients they've established relationships with over a long period of time, are actually pressured to go to MILCOA? Are you aware of that concern?
We can provide more information, Senator.
Oh, sorry, Ms Frame, are you aware of that concern?
I am, Senator. I am, yes.
So why do people have that concern?
I wouldn't express it in the terms you have, Senator. They are pressured to go to Milcoa. We can talk about the parameters under which the department requests a veteran undertake an assessment with Milcoa.
Okay, please.
So, Senator, the two circumstances, one is where a veteran is unable to find a doctor, and so we're able to refer them to Milcoa in that context.
So, Mr Kefford, I'm talking about circumstances where they've had a long-term relationship with the doctor. I was
coming to the second part of my answer, Senator.
Well, sorry, I'll just, for the record, they've had a long-term relationship with the medical practitioner, and the medical practitioners are telling me their clients are being pressured to go to Milcoa.
Senator, there have been circumstances, particularly recently, where we have had concerns about the either, and I'm not suggesting this in the particular circumstances, but in general terms, where we have concerns about the veracity of the reports in front of us, or indeed where we are seeing complex claims lodged with multiple conditions, where we have referred veterans for independent medical examination. I wouldn't describe that as being pressured to go to Milcoa. It's where the department consciously decides to refer for an independent medical examination. It is our preference that compensation reports are provided by treating doctors, but it's also been practice of certain providers to deliberately split veterans away from their treating doctors to go down a different path, usually involving commissions-based advocacy services.
Right. Okay. It appears that different rates are paid in certain circumstances. What's the current range of fees does the department pay in relation to compensation medical assessments? And feel free to take this on notice. And what factors determine the different payment rates?
Well, Senator, we might table the schedule to which I referred in my earlier evidence, because that has it, including the distinctions that Mr Brown drew in terms of the time of the consultation and so on, but we could table that this evening.
So, Mr Kefford, just to be clear, as I'm understanding your evidence, DVA does not hold contracts with medical providers at different rates for compensation medical assessments?
Senator, to give you a clear answer, we have two sets of contractual arrangements with doctors. One is with Milcoa for independent medical examinations, as I've described them. The other one is with Bupa, and that is for our internal medical advice to delegates. We do not have contracts with other treating doctors.
Okay, so what's...
Just last minute, I've just got to rotate the call given the limited time we have tonight.
Okay, I'll let you rotate the call.
You sure?
I'll come back. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm happy to come to you, Senator Shoebridge, and then I'll come to Senator Pocock if you've got questions.
Thanks, Sharon. I'll continue on the line of questioning because I've got to tell you I've heard from the AMA in Queensland, but also from doctors around the country, that they feel like they're being treated as potential criminals, including through correspondence they're getting, simply by treating veterans and then writing reports and providing them to the department. They feel like they're being targeted for doing their job and writing reports about veterans. It's not limited to one or two doctors. There's a sense out there that DVA is targeting them, and as you know, I've seen this similar correspondence, has been putting correspondence threatening to send them to the AFP. Are you unaware of this sense of concern amongst treating doctors?
Senator, can I just provide some context to your question? And I certainly wanted to emphasise, in response to Senator Scarr's questions as well, that we do meet regularly with medical professionals. The AMA, I understand the Queensland AMA is now distinct from the federal AMA, is that right?
And I had met with them.
But we've met with both the Queensland AMA and the AMA. We have a general practice advisory group in the department. We have regular interactions with medical professionals. But you heard me say in my opening statement that the government committed over $200 million to an integrity division in DVA in my EFO last year. Now, that's not a decision that's made in the absence of evidence of an increasing poor practice. And as I've said, I also said in my opening statement, most people do the right thing, and medical professionals who we work very responsibly and collaboratively with and have for many, many years, continuing to do the right thing. However, there was observed behaviour, and we saw it in billing practices, we saw it in veterans being referred to medical tests, many medical tests that the Department of Veterans Affairs did not wish them to undertake, did not require them to undertake. And that's a circumstance there, Senator Scarr, as well, where we would refer the veteran to Milcoa. And I have heard stories and reports back to me of veterans having to undertake less medical tests as a result of that referral than they otherwise might have been asked to take by a treating doctor when they were not required for claim decisions. So I just wanted to frame it in a context, Senator Shoebridge, that the decisions the government has made about integrity and compliance reflect increasing trends in data and in behaviour that the department has moved quickly to respond to, that we work collaboratively and cooperatively with the vast majority of medical professionals, but that we don't resile from taking action where there is observed behaviours and billing practices that are inappropriate for veterans and for the Australian taxpayer.
Well, where there is data, where your data has identified that as a potential in relation to a medical practitioner, that may well be one thing. But I'll just read you a quote from an email we got from a doctor. Long-standing GP clinics have been treated as though they're akin to the former Rosemary Centre, despite operating lawfully and appropriately for many years. This approach effectively treats doctors as suspect or criminal without evidence, simply because they provide care to veterans. I could read you a bunch of these. Doctors are saying to me, and to Senator Scarr, that actually when you're treated like a criminal suspect because you're providing care to veterans, it makes you want to not provide care to veterans. Now, I fully support identifying fraud. I fully support systems that identify fraud and misbehaviour. But you need to get the balance right. And what I'm hearing from doctors is you're treating them like criminals because they're caring for veterans. And if you're not getting that feedback through your own channels, well, then I don't think you're listening.
I have not been receiving that feedback, Senator, that most medical professionals feel that way. There are a very small number of whom I have been receiving feedback that they are unhappy about actions taken by the department. That is to be anticipated when compliance action is being undertaken. But I have not been receiving feedback from many medical professionals or from our Chief Health Officer, who is a general practitioner and works extensively with general practitioners, that there is widespread feeling of being persecuted or treated poorly by DVA.
Could we go to this differential that's paid? Until the last few months, I wasn't aware that different doctors were being paid different rates to provide the same assessment. But that is what I understand happens on the ground. The exact same assessment, page numbers, condition type, different doctors are being paid different amounts based on long-standing practice or other factors. Is that's what's happening?
In relation to compensation reports, yes, sir.
Yeah. And the immediate concern that raises with me is if the department can choose to pay one group of doctors a higher rate providing medical support, medical reports, than another group of doctors, that the department would have an institutional interest to restrain spending, and therefore those doctors that write meaner and harder reports may well be given a higher pay and encouraged to write more reports. And those doctors, treating doctors and others who write supportive reports, may well be paid lower rates because it's inconvenient when they write supporting reports. That's the immediate concern that comes to me, and I can tell you it's the concern that comes to veterans.
That's not correct, Senator.
So what... you must have data on what rates are being paid to treating doctors for reports as opposed to Milcoa, for example. You must have that data.
Senator, I'm just going to pass to Mr Kefford, but I would just like to open by saying the practice of paying what doctors bill, so I'll just clarify that. We pay what the doctors say it cost them. That is the practice of DVA, to pay that money to medical professionals. That has been long-standing practice since well before I was Secretary. What we moved to do in recent weeks, as Mr Kefford explained, in response to a concern about inequity in what was being sought, and some doctors who were billing amounts that simply didn't seem to be comparable to the work that was undertaken, nothing to do with what claims were there or what they were seeking for veterans, but it didn't seem to be comparable to the work that was undertaken. What we did was develop guidance for fees that we expect to be reasonable. So we have moved to provide that schedule that Mr Kefford said we will provide to the committee in direct response to the issue you are raising.
Well, Ms Frame, I have before acknowledged when the department does good work. And if you're stepping to try and address this concern, maybe we can step through if you're trying to address the concern of inequities. Because from my perspective, I've seen many statutory schemes in operation, and I've never seen them pay different rates to different providers for the exact same work. And it just sends warning bells off, particularly in circumstances where, there are a lot of veterans being directed to one provider here, Milcoa. It just sets off warning bells to a highly sensitive community. But can you provide to us what the fees provided, and the average fees provided for different reports are for Milcoa as against treating doctors? Are you able to provide that? I'm not expecting you to be able to do it now. Can you provide that on notice?
We can definitely do it on notice. We can provide you more information now, Senator. I would also say that the foundational approach is that the veterans seek their own doctor. That continues to be the practice.
And can you, on notice, provide over time the whatever change is happening in the numbers of these assessment reports that are coming from treating doctors, which in my view is,
preferable.
The far and away preferable. They know the patient.
I agree,
they've got a relationship.
Yes.
The numbers, the proportion that's coming from treating doctors as opposed to qualified, external experts such as Milcoa. Can you provide that going back, if you can, over 5 years so we can get a sense of what's happening? Because some data here would be really helpful.
We will get you some data, Senator.
Senator, the distinction I would draw, though, and I'll ask Mr Brown in a moment to step through the basis on which we arrived at the newly updated recommended fees in the schedule that was released in February. What I would point out, though, is that the purpose of the Milcoa contract is different, and what I could say about the data now is that there has been an increase in the last, say, 12 months as we have moved to refer more to independent examinations because we've had integrity concerns about the providers. Again, not other than in relation to particular providers. And I think the other point to make in this context is where there are investigations, and there have been, there's a much more detailed follow-up with the provider concerned.
Can I say the other data point that I think would be incredibly useful for getting a handle and maybe putting to bed concerns or maybe highlighting concerns? I don't know what the data shows. But to the extent to which you're able to assess whether Milcoa referrals support or don't support claims as against treating doctors, Milcoa reports support or don't support claims as against treating doctors. Do you have any sense that they are...
We might also include commercial advocates there also, Senator.
If you can break it down into that as well, it may well be commercial advocates have their own concerns, but
Senator,
if we have commercial advocates, Milcoa and treating doctors, and we get a sense of what's actually happening on the ground.
Yeah, I'm just mindful we have very limited time
Mr.
tonight.
Kefford.
So, Mr. Kefford, can you just
Sorry, I'll be brief,
answer, and then
Senator.
we'll have to move the call around.
The only point I make in relation to the Milcoa contract is we have no say over what the doctors write. They're on a... We pay for it to happen, so it doesn't pay for the report from the doctor, but we have no control over what they write.
Okay, I'll have to come back to you. Now I want to come to Senator Pocock and then Senator Scarr again.
Thank you for your time, and sorry we didn't get to you during Senate estimates. Secretary, I have an email from a DVA delegate in the Client Benefits Division, which I'm happy to circulate and seek to table, if that's all right. And it reads, it's very short, so I'll just read it out. It reads, "Hi. I would like all clinical notes from April 2023 as the date you confirmed you started seeing him, the veteran, for any and all medical conditions, please. This will help in processing claims for Mr. Redacted. Thanks, Redacted Delegate. The email was sent on the 4th of March 2026. So your delegate is asking for 3 years' worth of clinical notes to substantiate how long the doctor has been treating the patient. Secretary, how does the department think it's acceptable to ask a doctor to disclose every single clinical note about one of their patients just so that it can substantiate that the doctor was the patient's regular GP?
I'm not sure I can comment, Senator, without understanding more about the context here and being aware of what the circumstances are that led them to write that email. So if it's okay with you, I'd like to take it on notice and get more information about it, unless there's anyone at the table who thinks they can add more. But
is there any circumstance under which a delegate could ask for all medical records for the last 3 years? You know, what's the doctor supposed to do around confidentiality and privacy obligations? When I read this, I just think this is extraordinary.
Ms. Frame, I've heard the same thing in Queensland.
You've got no idea what you could be asking for, things that are totally irrelevant to any claim DVA may be processing. You know, things around someone's sexual health history, any other issues that they've raised with their GP.
Senator, I'd just like to say I'm not sure that is what they're asking for. I acknowledge it says all clinical notes, but there could be context where it's pursuant to claims that have been made with DVA. I would just ask to take it on notice so that I can find out more and understand what is the circumstances.
And so why do you even need clinical notes? Why not just billing history if you want to just ascertain that this has been the GP for 3 years? You could say, show me the billing history for the last 3 years.
I'm assuming, Senator, as I've said, I'd like to take it on notice and understand more about it. I'm assuming that it's notes pursuant to claims with DVA. I don't know whether they're initial liability or permanent impairment. It says initial liability at the top. So I'm assuming that it's medical notes relating to the condition that, or conditions that the veteran is seeking to have initial liability acknowledged. But I'm acknowledging myself. I have imperfect knowledge of these circumstances and I would like to find out more about it, and I will certainly have a response for you on notice, Senator.
Senator Pocock, I note that the document that's been circulated redacts, I think, most of the details that would allow Ms Frame to look at it. Equally, providing her the details probably precludes her from... We are in one of these binds around individual privacy. It may be that some of this can be transacted in a way that protects the privacy of the person about whom the request relates. I'm just thinking about how Ms Frame may most assist you. It's a reasonable question, but there's not very much on the piece of paper that's been circulated that will let her get to the bottom of it.
Which kind of highlights the whole problem, right? If you're asking for all clinical notes about someone, it raises serious privacy concerns and issues.
Well, asking about an individual case in an open hearing also engages those issues, and you've been very protective of these persons' interests, but I'm just alerting you to the fact that Ms Frame will need to make the same protections available when she's thinking about how to respond. So I'm just highlighting that it's a challenging issue to transact in an estimates environment for all of the reasons that you've alluded to.
Sure, I guess the context of it is all the concerns that I think a lot of senators would be being raised by constituents, by doctors, by veterans, that the current system...
Minister, I've talked to people who've received something similar, so it's more a systemic question as to whether or not there's something systemic going on, or you've got delegates who don't really understand what they should be asking for.
And so I guess...
So happy... Oh.
I'm very happy we can maybe chat to the person who sent this and see what details they're happy for me to pass on so you can look at it. But if it is the case that someone's asking for all details for the last 3 years, is this a practice that you can at least assure us that you're going to ask delegates to stop?
I've undertaken to understand what is the context behind this, Senator. It could be that the emails before and after make it very clear that it's a restricted request. It could be that the doctor only saw that person once from that time. And that I don't know, Senator. I'm just undertaking that I will find out more. These issues have not been raised with me until this evening, but I will go and look into it. And I share your concern about the request were it that. But I want to assure myself as to what might be asked here, Senator.
Can I finally just ask about Australian war graves? And I really want to thank the Minister and for the briefing. I really appreciate the information, which really helped me respond to some very concerned Canberrans who've been reading in the news about war graves being destroyed in Gaza. I was interested if you could tell the Senate how many Australian war graves have been destroyed in Gaza.
I have the Head of the Office of Australian War Graves here to assist you with your question, Senator.
Alison McLaren, Deputy Secretary, Veteran Family and Stakeholder Experience. So, Senator, the Commonwealth War Graves Commission reports that about 22% of headstones have been reported to be damaged, and that indicates potentially 146 of the 263 Australian headstones may be damaged at the Gaza War Cemetery.
Thank you. And apart from the headstones being moved, where you estimate 146 of 263, what is the officer's understanding about the integrity of the graves? Have the remains of any Australian soldiers been disturbed?
Can I have here, Senator, the latest report from the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, which is from September last year. This is the first opportunity I've had to table this with the Senate, and with the Senate's permission, I'd like to table the report. So, Senator, the report details the current damages we know. The updated information we received from the CWGC in December indicated no further damage than what is contained within that report.
So, have the remains of any Australian soldiers been disturbed?
I'll hand to Mr Stothard.
Senator Wade Stothard, Director War Graves, Office of Australian War Graves in the Department of Veterans Affairs. The Commonwealth War Graves Commission, as I think the committee has heard previous testimony, evacuated its locally employed staff in the Gaza Strip at the commencement of the hostilities. So it's relying on third-party assessments and reports, which it is receiving relatively regularly, and that's been the basis of the most recent reporting that's just been tabled. The photographs and the satellite imagery that has been reported in the media are very evident of severe damage, as is reported on the Commonwealth War Graves Commission website and updated regularly. It is not... So what I'm coming to is a detailed survey and assessment of every grave and the remains, and the amount of damage that has occurred is difficult to assess at this stage. We have not received direct reports that human remains have been exposed or damaged directly. However, by looking at the imagery and the overhead satellite imagery, it's quite possible that Australian servicemen in war graves have been affected by the damage that's occurred.
Okay, so you would expect that Australian soldiers have been disturbed by...
It's quite possible, Senator, but again, the direct hard evidence will require on-the-ground assessment and survey of the burial plots and the graves that have been affected.
When was the most recent communication with the Government of Israel about the status of the war graves?
From the Australian Government or from the Commonwealth War Graves Commission?
Australian Government.
I am in contact with DFAT, Foreign Affairs and Defence officials. I know that there has been regular contact with their counterparts, but perhaps for the detailed date and type of that correspondence or interaction, those questions would be best directed towards those other government agencies, Senator.
Thank you. And then just finally, Minister, have discussions been had with the Israeli government or the ambassador or representatives about who will be paying for this restoration?
I can give you information about, I suppose, the representations that have been made. So essentially, as I understand it, we've provided evidence to this committee previously that the Commonwealth War Graves Commission manages the Gaza War Cemetery on behalf of Australia, and they have been monitoring and sending updates, as the one that Ms McLaren just sought to table. They have also visited the region and made representations to highlight the damage to the cemetery and the need for the Commonwealth War Graves Commission to gain access as quickly as possible. I think the Prime Minister has indicated that President Herzog's visit allowed the opportunity for the Prime Minister to raise a range of issues with President Herzog, including concerns about damage to Commonwealth war graves in Gaza. And I don't have information about costs, but I do understand that the Commonwealth War Graves Commission plan to repair the cemetery as soon as it is safe to do so. However, it is expected that full reconstruction will take some time, given the immediate post-conflict priority will be for works that are directed towards humanitarian effort.
Okay, I need to move the call around. I understand, Senator McLaughlin, you have a follow-on clarifying question on this, and then I'll come to Senator Scarr.
Somewhat obvious question, but just to alleviate my concern, we do have a complete record of every name and inscription on the graves. So
Senator, yes, there's detailed surveys of all of the Commonwealth War Graves Commission cemeteries by row and plot number. We do know exactly where each Australian soldier and other Commonwealth soldier graves were located in all those cemeteries.
And what is the view of the United Kingdom at the moment? Do they hold a similar position to ourselves, or have they been granted any more substantive access to the site? Since they have the majority, I think, isn't it, in the grave?
Yes, Senator, I think the majority of member governments.
Yes.
I have not had direct interaction with UK officials on this matter. My interactions with the Commonwealth War Graves Commission members is that all member governments are incredibly concerned and all are watching closely and seeking updates very regularly. I do know that the Commonwealth War Graves Commission in the delegation that visited Israel late last year met with all Defence Attachés. Amongst the Defence Attaché staff, the United Kingdom Defence Attaché has been taking the lead of all member governments in the interactions with the Israeli Defence Forces.
Has any consideration been given at this stage that when the opportunity arises to renovate the cemetery, whether we're going to renovate it as is, or the Commonwealth is going to, not the Australian Commonwealth, the Commonwealth War Graves, is going to seek to start afresh and think of a new design? Or that's too early for those discussions?
Yeah, Senator, I think it is a bit too early for those discussions. Safe access, a complete detailed survey, and then that will inform the next steps once we can ensure safety, access, security of the site to then commence discussions around rebuild options.
Have the Israelis given us any indication of when that's likely to be?
I think that the security situation in the Strip is being watched very closely by many, many parties. I know the Commonwealth War Graves Commission is seeking to understand how quickly they could safely enter. It's my understanding that the Israeli government has indicated they understand the need for the Commonwealth War Graves Commission to gain access as soon as it is safe to do so, and that would probably be supported, would be the assessment I've understood.
Is it, one more. Is it roped off at the moment? I'm using my terms. Is the Israeli army treating it with respect?
It's my understanding that of the two cemeteries that are in the Gaza Strip, the Gaza War Cemetery, which has received the significant damage is located in the Israeli-controlled area of the Gaza Strip, and no further damage, given the ceasefire, has occurred or is likely. The exact state of its perimeter, I am unsure of.
Thank you.
The call, Senator Scarr.
Chair, I realise we're running out of time, so I'll just ask 2 questions and then cede to my colleague, Senator Collins, if I can. A concern's been raised with me in relation to the disparity that exists for the compensation assessment work that's charged by practitioners as opposed to treatment charges, even under the new regime, the new schedule that's been released, so that concern's been raised. I want to take you to 2 particular examples of issues that have been raised with me. The first is multi-condition assessments and comparing the position in relation to the DVA compared to, say, work cover under different state jurisdictions. So practitioners I've spoken to emphasise, and this is certainly my experience dealing with veterans through my constituency work, emphasises that quite often they have to assess multiple conditions, as you would all know, over a very lengthy period of time. They're telling me that the DVA proposed maximum for a multi-condition assessment is $754.62, as opposed to, say, under Work Cover Queensland, if you're dealing with, say, 10 conditions, the amount that can be charged is $9,270. So where you have a multiple number of conditions, there's this huge disparity that opens up between what DVA is prepared to pay for an assessment as opposed to what, say, Work Cover is prepared to pay. How do you respond to that?
Senator Luke Brown, First Assistant Secretary, Policy and Research Division. I would need to look at the particular circumstances of those invoices. My analysis of Queensland Work Cover's fee schedule for its compensation reports doesn't indicate they have any ability for separate conditions to be charged with their invoices within the same claim.
No, well, I'm not saying that. Separate invoice, well, I just want to make sure we're not speaking across purposes. The basic fundamental proposition is DVA does not appropriately recognise the difference in making an assessment of a veteran who's only got 1 condition as opposed to assessing a veteran who's maybe got 10 conditions, and that's a distinction or difference from work cover, say in Queensland and other work covers.
Comparisons between the 2 fee schedules are difficult, Senator. Those amounts that you've quoted don't sound correct to me. I would need to look at the particular circumstances. For example, Queensland Work Cover have incentives for reports being paid within 10 days as opposed to after 10 days. We have fees for consultation separate to per page fees for reports. So the comparison is difficult, but we have made those benchmarking comparisons, and our assessment is very different to what you're hearing.
It's curious that AMA Queensland is raising these issues with me because they're dealing with the practitioners at the coalface. So can I turn my last question before I see the call to Senator Collins in relation to psychiatrist fees?
Yep.
My information is that psychiatrist compensation fees have been frozen since November 2013, over 12 years. It has been proposed to increase those fees. I acknowledge that. But even with the increase, there's still, again, a disparity between, say, what DVA will pay for, say, a standard assessment. And again, here's an example I've been given by AMA. Standard assessment under the proposed fee structure or the new fee structure, $1,082.64. SA work cover, $2,047.80. Are you aware of those disparities?
In psychiatrist reports?
Yes.
Senator, well, the numbers... Our fee schedule has been revised. We released that.
Well, this is under the revised fee schedule.
Yeah. So for a complex psychiatry report, our new fees are just over $2,000.
Okay. So under South Australian work cover, it's $2,866 compared to DVA of just over 2027. So again, you've got this, sorry, let me finish. You've got this huge discrepancy which feeds into the concern which is being raised by medical practitioners, the AMA, that why are our best medical practitioners going to do this work if they get paid more to do other work?
Well, I'd need to look at the working out, Senator, because our analysis has Queensland work cover for a complex psychiatry report at something like $1,300. So I would need to look at how the fees that you're referring to have been worked out. We have provided our comparison, our benchmarking comparison to national AMA, and have had no concerns raised with the benchmarking that we've done, but I'm very happy to look at the figures that you've raised and see how they worked out.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'll come to the Deputy Chair for about 5 minutes. I'll come to Senator Shoebridge and I'll come back to the Deputy Chair. So it's Deputy Chair, you've got the call.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to follow on from this topic of integrity measures, and I know that you found almost $1 million in saves over the forwards. Can I just hear from you an outline of what some of those integrity measures are?
Certainly, Senator.
Yeah, can I just ask officials perhaps to step through what problem we're trying to solve? We've had a lot of discussion and appropriately questions from senators about concerns about the solution. I think it's worth stepping through the challenges that DVA is now confronting. Minister Keogh's obviously made some public remarks about it, but I think it would be good for officials to speak to that first.
Thank you, Minister. I'll start and I'll ask Mr Coles to add when I'm finished. There's a range of behaviours that have become evident in our system in the last perhaps 18 months that have coincided with the increase in throughput. We've increased our decision making. We had a record year last year, 92% up on the last year before the interim report of the Royal Commission. So the size of our scheme has increased significantly. One of the unfortunate elements that has emerged as part of that is a growth in commercial advocacy entities charging commissions on fees. Often those entities are associated with, as in corporately associated with medical providers, and so part of the approach, given that we are obliged to investigate every claim that comes to us, has been to increase the number of claimed conditions with a view to maximising testing revenue and income, because we do the test, we have to pay for the test whether or not we ultimately accept the claim. We've also seen examples, and without revisiting the discussion we've just been having on fees for report writing, of bills for individual reports in the tens of thousands, up to $30,000 for a single report. And so there's been a range of measures that the government has asked us to undertake, including establishing a integrity division that Mr Coles now leads, of the magnitude that is in keeping with, or will, once mature, be in keeping with the magnitude of our counterpart departments. So there's been a range of measures that have been canvassed in detail with this committee in relation to the behaviour of commercial and particularly commissions-based advocates, and there's a consultation paper following on from the committee's report that addresses legislative options for containing that particular aspect of our concerns. We have established, as part of the compliance efforts, and are now expanding the first stage in dealing with concerns of behaviour by medical providers, where we in effect put particular providers on manual payments and do audits of their billing. So in an exercise we undertook through the course of last year, we were finding false claims to be, in some cases, 3/4 of the total claims lodged by a particular provider. And so part of that is about the financial cost, part of that is, so there's a financial reaction to that and potentially a criminal one. There's also professional engagement with the relevant college or professional body in relation to provider misconduct. And so there's a range of measures that we have embarked upon. The other thing that one of the things that I'll close on and pass to Mr Coles is building up our capacity to interrogate our own data on what we're seeing and better identify outliers in terms of claiming behaviour, particularly by treating doctors rather than the compensation report writing that we've been speaking about. But I'll ask Mr Coles if he wants to add to that with the breakdown.
And can we just make it quick, please, because we are low on time. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Anthony Coles, First Assistant Secretary, Provider Integrity Division. I can't add too much more to the evidence that Mr Kevin just gave. It's a very comprehensive summary of what we're doing. But just to pick up on the element of your question that went to the saves, the Secretary mentioned in her opening remarks the Strengthening Program Integrity and Veterans Advocacy, my EFA measure, multifaceted measure, but the particular savings targets relevant to the integrity measure that are embedded within that is $685.9 million in saves over 4 years from this financial year, and then $313.6 million per year ongoing. So that reflects the quantum of the problem. It's a hard problem to measure. It's a hard problem to quantify precisely. But the Secretary mentioned at the start, the way we've approached that is through our observations in terms of the program administration that we do, but also drawing on sources like the Commonwealth Fraud Prevention Centre and the types of modelling that centre does across government programs more broadly.
So you've quantified it through modelling from an independent source, did you say?
Well, we've quantified it through the observations and experience that has been gleaned by the department in the administration of its programs, as Mr Keff had mentioned. We've drawn on the experience of other agencies in the Fraud Fusion Task Force, which is a whole of government body that involves or includes agencies that administer large payment programs. We've drawn on evidence from the Commonwealth Fraud Prevention Centre, and to the extent we could, we also worked with a consultancy that helped us do some more precise modelling around the quantum of those saves. And as we move forward, into the implementation phase, which we're in now, part of that work also involves the development of basically a savings calculator that allows us to put in at the top of that calculator the work that we're doing in the integrity space, and to come up with a resulting savings figure from that work.
So can you just sort of help me understand this sort of quantification issue? How big is this fraud problem here? Like the legislation or your processes can only catch a small part of that, so the saves are only going to be a small part of that. So is that saying to us that you've identified the problem of fraud to be a whole lot bigger than that? And if so, how big is it?
Well, Senator, I think what I would say is APS agencies involved as DVA is in large payment programs have collectively identified this as a significant problem. I've referenced the Commonwealth Fraud Prevention Centre. It estimates that the likely loss of government of fraud to government payment programs and improper payments is between 3% to 5.95% of the payments. So pretty rough maths, but if you apply that to DVA across administered expenditure in outcomes 1 and 2, and as I said, it's pretty rough because it's not necessarily all going to be in frame, that gives you a figure of between $585 million to $962 million per year. But as I said, Senator, that's sort of taken it with a grain of salt, but that's the numbers you come up with when you apply that percentage range developed by the Commonwealth Fraud Prevention Centre.
And Senator, if I might just add to that, it's worth keeping in mind that the bulk of these savings come from not from benefits to veterans, but for payments for the testing process. That's been one area that has been particularly targeted by the behaviour about which we have become concerned. So it's not about it's not a policy response that affects veterans. It's about targeting the behaviour that we're seeking to manage, and we have done, and we've given evidence before that even where a veteran finds out, sometimes by approaching a doctor to have a treatment paid for, that their entitlement has already been used, we will still pay for the veteran to receive the service, so they're not disadvantaged even if they have been a victim of this sort of inappropriate claiming behaviour.
Okay, so just to clarify, the savings that you've got in the forward estimates are inaccurate, best guess. We've just heard that it could be more or it could be less. Am I correct in
I think
clarifying
you're
that?
talking about two different things, Senator Collins. I think you asked Mr Kefford about the likely program leakage, and he provided you with the metric that is utilised. The specific savings are less than that, are they not, Mr Kefford? You can talk through them.
So, but what we're talking about here is catching fraud and the savings from that, and from the testimony that we've heard in the hearings, fraud is getting worse and it's probably only going to get worse. So we're just trying to understand, budgets are a pretty important part of this process. That's why we hear this estimate. So I'm just trying to understand how accurate those forward estimates are, because it's a lot of money that are in the forwards, in the saves, nearly $1 billion, $700 million. So it's a lot of money. Can I just ask what steps you're taking to communicate directly with the veterans, just to make sure that they're aware of the claims being submitted in their name and to prevent this from occurring?
Yes. Senator, we are... There's a number of things we're doing in that space. First of all, as I say, often we find out because a veteran has a payment refused at the point of payment that this has happened, and so we then have to follow the trail back. What we're looking at doing at the moment, it's not easy for veterans to see what's being claimed against their card in our systems. We're working on a IT project to enable that as part of future enhancement to my service.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay. Senator Shubridge.
Thanks, Chair. Could I go back to the bulldozing and desecration of Australian war graves in Gaza? And thank you for providing the report. What is the date of this report, sorry?
That's September 2025.
September 25. Do you know when in September the department received it?
So we would have received it after the meeting of the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, which I don't have that exact date.
Sometime in September, is that when
Yes.
the department received it? I've got to say the images of the bulldozed graves, which aren't just showing headstones disturbed, but show where Australian soldiers' remains would likely be being bulldozed, are incredibly disturbing. What did you do on receipt of this?
So, Senator, as you're aware, the Commonwealth War Graves Commission manages those cemeteries on behalf of the Australian government. So the information that's made public was made available. They have a challenging sites update section on their website, and we acknowledge that we could have done better, and we've since put an update on our website on the condition of the war graves, so that's direct from our website, whereas previously it was a link through to the Commonwealth War Graves Commission.
Was the Prime Minister given copies of these photos showing the bulldozing of war graves before he met with President Herzog?
I think that's a question for the Prime Minister's office.
Did the department give the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet and/or the Prime Minister's office directly a copy of this evidence of Israeli bulldozing of Australian and other war graves before he met with President Herzog?
I'll have to take that on notice, Senator.
Well, it would have been essential. Was there engagement between the department and the Prime Minister and Cabinet or the Prime Minister's office in the lead up to President Herzog's visit? We heard the Prime Minister say that he raised it. Did he show?
Senator, it would not be customary for the department to communicate with the Prime Minister's office directly, but we'll take on notice whether there was any communication internally with you... Prime Minister and Cabinet, or our Minister's office may well have communicated.
Well, who runs this part of the department? Who runs this part of the department?
Ms McLaren is the Deputy Secretary.
Well, you'd know if you were engaging with the Prime Minister's department in the lead up to President Herzog's visit. Did you or do you know anyone in the department who gave this
I think
to the Prime
official not
Minister's
just
office
taken this
before
on
President
notice?
Herzog visit?
Senator, I think the official took it on notice, did you not?
Well,
I
heard-
had conversations, but I said I'll take it on notice to
do
find
you
out if anyone...
sitting there now, do you know if anyone, are you aware of anyone in the department or any part of the department giving this report, which shows bulldozing Australian graves potentially? Do you know, sitting there now, are you aware of anybody or any part of the department giving this to the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet before President Herzog's visit?
Senator, we've said that we'll take that on notice so that we can get you an accurate response to that.
Has there been a briefing provided to Prime Minister and Cabinet? Was there a briefing provided? It's your department. You'd know if a briefing was provided. Was a briefing provided?
No, I have not provided a briefing to Prime
Has
Minister.
the department provided a briefing? You run this section. Has the department?
We've not provided a briefing to Prime Minister and Cabinet.
Have you provided a briefing to the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade?
We have had discussions with the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade.
Are you aware if any part of the Australian government has raised objections about the desecration of Australian graves by the Israeli military as evidenced in this report?
Yes, the Prime Minister raised concerns directly with the President of Israel that the Department of Defence, the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade have raised concerns directly, and we have raised concerns through the Commonwealth War Graves Commission.
Has anybody referred this for potential investigation as a war crime for the desecration of graves? Have you sought legal advice on whether what appears on the face of it to be the desecration of graves, which is a war crime, has anyone sought legal advice on whether or not this amounts to a war crime?
So, Senator, as we've advised previously, these cemeteries are managed on behalf of the Australian Government by the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. We can seek advice from them on what actions they're taking, but they manage this on our behalf, just as we manage all graves in Australia on behalf of all member nations.
But the Commonwealth War Graves Commission doesn't have an obligation to hold people to account, to bring people to justice who have desecrated Australian war graves. The Australian government has that obligation to bring people to justice who have desecrated Australian war graves. Have you even sought legal advice or referred this to the AFP for potential investigation for war crimes?
No, we've not referred it to the AFP.
Have you sought legal advice as to whether or not this desecration amounts to a war crime?
Senator, I believe Ms McLaren has clarified that that would come from the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, who also represent other nations that have graves in that cemetery.
It is,
and
Ms Frame,
we would take it on notice, Senator, to ask them.
Ms Frame, it is not the job of the Commonwealth War Graves Commission to hold people to account under Australian criminal law, which applies across the world for war crimes. It's not their job. It's the Australian government's job. Has the department sought legal advice as to whether or not this desecration of graves amounts to a potential war crime under Australian law? Have you sought that advice?
No.
And Minister, it's your understanding that this has all just been handed over to the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. Is that your understanding?
That is totally at odds with the evidence that's been provided to you, Senator Shoebridge. You've had it explained to you by officials that representations have been made by DFAT and defence officials through the embassy to the Israeli government. You've had it, you know that the Prime Minister Albanese raised it with President Herzog during his visit here. You know also that we are in regular engagement as with the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. The High Commissioner in the United Kingdom represents Australia into that forum.
Minister,
we are actively
we don't even know if the Prime Minister had the photos.
And so your assertion that it was that people were not being involved,
Minister,
from the Australian government perspective, is simply wrong and at odds with the evidence that's
Minister,
before
this
you.
department didn't even give the Prime Minister a brief. There's no evidence the Prime Minister ever saw the photos of bulldozed graves. That's what the evidence is today.
That is not the evidence.
No
that is
evidence.
before you,
No one
Senator
can provide me
Sheldon.
any evidence that these photographs of bulldoze graves were provided to the Prime Minister before he raised it with President Herzog.
Senator
That's the
Sheldon,
evidence.
That is not the evidence. You asked whether this department had directly briefed either the Prime Minister's office or the Department of
I didn't
Prime
say
Minister
directly, I said
and
briefed.
Cabinet, and they said that they would take that on notice.
No, they said they hadn't
But
briefed.
it is also
They
the
said they
case
hadn't
that
briefed.
in
You're
an
not listening,
ordinary
Minister.
Senators,
arrangement for
thank
cabinet
you.
government,
Senators, thank you very much. Let's just get back
in an
to
ordinary
Minister
cabinet
answering.
government arrangement, this department is principally responsible for briefing the Minister for Veterans Affairs.
Did you brief the Minister for Veteran Affairs?
Yes.
Can you provide the brief to this committee?
You have the
I have this.
document.
Was that all you didn't provide? I asked if you provided a brief.
Can I take on notice what briefings were provided, Senator?
Could I quickly go to another matter, which is the backlog of permanent impairment claims? I was looking at the numbers earlier. They seem to have increased from October to December. Can you provide what the number is now in the backlog of permanent impairment claims, and can you provide us the December and October figures for comparison?
It's just over 26,000, Senator. We can get you the exact number. I would also point out that that pertains to less than half the number of veterans who actually own those claims, because the vast majority of those claims are DIRCA claims, which represent about 5,300 veterans and 18,000 claims. So just making the point, Ms Hatzis-Marlis will give you the exact number, but the veteran number is significantly less than the total claim number.
No, but what is the trend happening? I don't mean to ask this, just what struck me was the backlog was increasing, but if that's not the case, tell me, or if it is the case, explain why.
Senator, the cases on hand have increased. We've seen a 60% increase in DIRCA lodgements year on year this year, and as the Secretary has identified, of the 26,000, there's about 18.5 for DIRCA and 7.5 for MERCA claims. The other observation I'd make is that the average age of those claims for DIRCA are 116 days for serving members and 169 days for ex-serving veterans. Under the MERCA, the average age is 97 days for serving members and 94 for ex-serving. And so while, and as we've said in previous estimates, obviously at the point we're in we're in PI claims, the initial liability has been provided, the incapacity payments are there, medical treatments being provided.
Mr. Kevin, I think the concern I had with you with the department last time was the communication given from the Minister that everything was reducing, that backlogs were all going down, and I thought that was not an accurate characterisation given by the Minister at the press club, and we've had that exchange. If there's been a 60% increase in DIRCA claims, I can understand why the department is having difficulty dealing with them. I'm not here, this is not a gotcha moment, it's to try and understand what's happening and what you're intending to do with it, so as we don't get back to where we were in the bad old days.
Senator, in my opening statement, I referenced directly some of the actions that we are undertaking in response to this, which is bringing in more CSOs to assist with communicating to veterans directly about the status of their claims, outbound calls, and also looking at the medical documentation and preparing it for delegate decision, which is work that CSOs can do very quickly. I also talked about an AI pilot, which is commencing next week with Queensland RSL, that is preparing summaries of medical information to assist delegate decision making. And there are other ICT enhancements that are being made, Senator. So there are measures and steps underway to continue to improve the decision-making capability.
What independent assessment are you putting in place to oversight the AI assessment? Are you going through this process with some kind of independent check from the outset
We have a range of checks, Senator. We have an AI advisory committee that includes veterans and external experts on that advisory committee, as well as extensive work. I'm just looking for my AI expert here. Thank you. But there are also compliance with all government processes using GovAI and the controls that they have in place there. But Mr Carrolley can provide you more information.
And perhaps, Mr Carrolley, are veterans being told that their claim is being assessed in part using AI, and can they opt out of it?
Yes, Alex Carrolley, First Assistant Secretary of the Technology, Digital and Data Division. DVA has a number of AI programs in place. We follow both the responsible use of AI government policy as well as the APS AI plan. We've got an AI transparency statement on our website which outlines publicly what we're doing in terms of both AI use internally as well as AI use that relates to veterans. In terms of the tool that the Secretary mentioned, it is a pilot tool. It's built within the GovAI environment, which sits within the Department of Finance, and it will be run as a trial on a voluntary consent basis, and that voluntary consent basis will be with consenting veterans who wish to participate. Those veterans, we've got a MOU in place with the RSL Queensland, as well as the Department of Finance to run the trial through.
Ms Carrolley, if you could provide any more details on this. I see the Chair's keeping an eye on time.
In terms of the business process safeguards around it, as my colleague said, it's certainly opt-in. We're also running a parallel process, so while the claim will go through the tool to both verify the tool for future use, but also to ensure that we're looking at it, it will be looked at by one of my CSOs as well.
All right. There have been concerns raised with me about the historical use of AI inside the department not meeting the AI transparency standards. Can you confirm whether historical use of AI met the transparency standards?
Yes, so we publish our use of AI on our transparency statement, which is publicly available on the website. That includes a range of AI uses within the department.
That's going forward. Historically, though, can you, only because we've run out of time, can you provide details on notice of the historical use of AI by the department prior to the publication of the transparency statement, and can you provide some explanation as to what, if any, transparency or consent obligations were put in place for the historical use of AI prior to that statement being published?
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Senator. Deputy Chair.
Chair, Secretary, in the last round of estimates, you confirmed that when the Minister referred to clearing the claims backlog in his press club speech last year, he was referring to claims that were identified at a single point of time during the Royal Commission. Is that correct?
I'm not looking at my testimony, Senator, but we clarified that that was in reference to the Royal Commission backlog, and that was an initial liability backlog that was being referred to.
Thank you. During that point of time. What percentage of claims are submitted by current serving members each week?
Oh, I'm not sure weekly figures, Senator, but on average, I think it's about 40%. So someone might have more information.
Yes, thank you. Tara Hatzismalis, Acting First Assistant Secretary, Department of Veterans Affairs. When we look at the numbers of claims lodged at liability, we're looking at a split of roughly 60-40 for serving to non-serving, and then when we move to permanent impairment, it flips the other way. So we're looking at lodgements of approximately 40% for serving members and 60% for non-serving.
So 60-40 and then 40-60.
Correct.
Is it surprising to you that only 5,000 members leave the ADF each year, but you're consistently receiving about 10,000 claims per month?
Senator, I won't express it as the opinion you're asking for. The serving members are able to make claims with us and do. And indeed, they're encouraged to do so. So the composition is, in one sense, whatever comes in that week.
And there are over 300,000 veterans in Australia, Senator, who interact with DVA. So there's a greater number that are able to lodge claims at any point in time, not just members who have recently transitioned from the ADF.
And there's no limitation on what they claim, and we're obliged to look at them. And we have seen, as we've given evidence previously, 10% growth year on year this year in claim numbers. It was about 9% last year. And sitting underneath that is the growth in the number of conditions being claimed is growing at something like double that rate.
Growth in the number of conditions, would that be because they're doing, I mean...
There's a number of things that might drive it. One of the things that we have been concerned about, and I won't repeat the evidence we've given earlier in relation to integrity concerns, but one of the behaviours that has been observed from commercial advocates has been to significantly increase the number of conditions in each claim and the number of claims that are made as part of the strategy I was referring to earlier.
Do you prioritise veterans over serving members of the Defence Force when you're doing claims?
Senator, the first prioritisation that we take is in relation to vulnerability. And so that's one of the biggest differences since before the Royal Commission is the average age of the unallocated cases was over 330 days before they were allocated. We're now averaging about 6. And so what that allows us to do is when we receive a new claim, we're looking for vulnerability. And one of the considerations would be whether this is a veteran's first claim with us or whether they've had several, and obviously the nature of those claims. So whether it's from a serving or ex-serving veteran is not a key determinant in that process.
Can I just add, though, Senator, there have been times in the past when we have prioritised veteran claims when there were long waits for initial liability to be determined, because we knew with serving members, and we discussed this and agreed this with Defence, serving members have access to healthcare services in through Joint Health Command. So they are not waiting to receive healthcare services, but we had a veteran population, while initial liability had not been determined, who were otherwise waiting to receive that access to healthcare services. So in that situation, there was a prioritisation applied for initial liability claims to veterans.
Okay, thank you. Since January 2025, you've consistently had around 47,000 claims on hand each month, and over the last couple of months that's climbed to 49,000 claims on hand. Is this persistent, the 49,000 number, an ongoing backlog?
I wouldn't describe it as a backlog, Senator. One of the features is, and I think that's a subset of the total cases on hand, that number. But if you look at the age of our claims, and we publish data about this on our website, one of the things that's happened as we've increased our processing capacity and speed is that the age of the claims on hand is getting much younger. So we're now at the point where about half our claims are less than 200 days and about 3/4 are less than 300. If you go back to pre-Royal Commission, there was a much longer and much older cases on hand as well.
Okay. In January, you reported that the average time taken to process a Merca initial liability claim was 339 days in the 25-26 financial year today. And that compared to 296 days in the corresponding 25 financial year. So can you just walk me through why the number is so different to the reported average days on hand data reported as 195 days?
So, Senator, the total time taken to process is the average age of all the cases we deal with in a particular month. One of the things we did towards the end of last financial year that did very much, and we said so at the time, increase our average time taken to process was we had a particular focus on dealing with our oldest cases. So we did 6,500 cases that were over 800 days old in the last few months of the 4-5 financial year. So that would be the primary driver for the increase in the overall age. So That's also the statistic the Secretary referred to earlier for claims that have been lodged and determined in the last 12 months. The average time for a Merkur IL is about 120 days to determination. Because we're not working through the pile simply chronologically, there are a number of measures, all of which are correct, but the reason or the main driver of that growth last year was a concerted effort to get rid of our oldest cases.
Okay, so you've got, I mean, there is a continuing backlog. You might want to phrase it differently, but it is a backlog of, well, it's 49,000 cases, and you've got increasing processing times according to the year-on-year data. So do you think that you will need even more staff on hand to be able to address the problem?
Well, Senator, the government invested significantly in the department's capability in the mid-year update. What we're seeing is both record claims years and record determinations. One of the features of having a workforce that is now almost exclusively ongoing Australian public servants is we are finding benefits in terms of productivity and capacity that's flowing through from training. We've mentioned a range of technology-related measures that will help us continue to deal with what we expect to be significant growth. And there are also measures in the Vets Act that commenced on the 1st of July that will have a significant impact on our processing time, particularly as it relates to decision-making on presumptive cases where that decision process will be significantly reduced because of the particular provisions that apply from the 1st of July.
Because my understanding is that according to the January 26 data, the peak of staff, the department's claims processing workforce at full-time equivalent has decreased from its peak in December 22 of 1,113 to now 860. So I'm just wondering why you're decreasing the claims processing workforce when the time to process the claims on hand is taking long.
Senator, if you look at the detail in those numbers, the actual delegate count has not changed much at all. Very small margin. And what that reduction constitutes is a large number of claims support officers who were brought on to help deal with the Royal Commission backlog, which was a backlog. Claims on hand are not a backlog, but the Royal Commission stipulated and recognised that there was a backlog of initial liability claims. So we brought in a large number of claims support officers to work through all the documentation and present those claims ready to be made for decision by delegates. A lot of those CSOs have actually moved into the delegate numbers and they're reflected in the delegate count now. And you heard me say in my opening statement as well that we are bringing in some claim support officers again to assist us with outbound calls, updating veterans on their claims and doing that work again to look across the information that's available to be presented to delegates for decision making.
So the claims on hand have increased. We've gone up to 49,000. So have you not thought about bringing those staff back in that you had during the Royal Commission to clear the backlog there?
I just said, Senator, we're getting some additional staff, some claim support officers.
But is it going to be the same staff? What happened to them when you were clearing that backlog? Is it going to be the same staff that's coming back in?
I don't imagine it would be the same staff, Senator. People have left over a pretty long period of time. And as I said, many have moved into permanent roles in the department. But as I said, we are bringing in some new claim support officers at this time.
How many will be bringing back in?
I'll have to take that on notice, Senator, about the exact number.
And then will that be permanent and ongoing? Will you maintain that headcount?
The approach, Senator, is to bring people in on labour hire and then they can move to either non-ongoing positions or to ongoing positions. And the staffing numbers indicate how much the ongoing staffing numbers for the Department of Veterans Affairs have increased significantly. We have 60%. You talked about numbers in CBD, the Client Benefits Division at the beginning. Those numbers are up 60% from 2022. So there's been a really significant increase, and that is permanent staff, Senator. So that has really contributed to the increased productivity. But acknowledge, as you said, claims are coming in at an increasing rate, and we are continuing to make record determinations.
Thank you very much, Secretary.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
We need to keep moving on the program. I know we have to finish by 8:30, but
I'll put all my other questions on notice.
yeah. Okay. So we'll release the department now. Thank you. And we'll now have the Repatriation Medical Authority come to the table. We'll just suspend very briefly. This show on the road. All right. Now, Professor Campbell, good evening. Welcome now, Professor Terence Campbell, Chair of the Repatriation Medical Authority. Did you have an opening statement tonight?
No, I don't.
Excellent. That's good. That's the answer I wanted, actually.
You've
So
only
well
got
done.
15 minutes.
You get a gold star. We're going to go straight to questions. Senator Shoebridge.
Professor, thanks for coming. The questions I'm going to be asking you are really all about the statement of reasons and what led to them regarding blast-induced mild traumatic brain injury.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah. So thanks for coming, and I'm sorry we didn't get to you last time. You requested in August of 2023, you requested research from the Department of Veteran Affairs, primary research into the links between dementia pugilistica, which is sometimes described as blast-induced mild traumatic brain injury, one part of that.
Yep.
And service, and particularly chronic repetitive blast injury. Can you explain what led you to ask for that request?
Well, the lack of such evidence, which is still the case, really. I mean, to be honest, I don't think I was expecting that they were going to be able to do the sort of research that needs to be done, and I think that's why we eventually got the response that we got, which was, let's see if the Americans have the numbers to do it. It's the sort of research that requires a very large number of people to be followed for a very long time. It just can't easily be done.
Well, you said, the chair, and I think...
That was me.
You were chair at the time too. Yes.
I was, yes.
You, in the correspondence you sent to the department, you said there appears to be a confluence of interest from the veteran community, some evidence of an association and much conjecture as to the mechanism of injury from blast exposure. A detailed study would be most welcome. I assume that was your opinion then, that remains your opinion now?
Remains my opinion, it would be most welcome. I don't think Australia's got the size to do it.
Or
sample size, if you like.
Well, we've had thousands of people serving in the artillery units over the last decades. Are you saying that that body would be insufficient? Thousands over decades?
If you're asking me to design the study, I really can't do it off the top of my head.
Well, I'm more just responding to your proposition that there would be sufficient people.
And it's not going to be about it. It's going to be, I mean, there's some evidence about acute events. Somebody's exposed to a blast and subsequent problems. What we're being asked to look at here is sort of multiple, if you like, subclinical or subliminal exposures, and whether that could lead to ultimately dementia, but some sort of impact on thinking and cognition, etc. The problem is, as people get older, that happens to many of us, whether we've been exposed to artillery or not, and the issue will be finding enough evidence that they're different, that the two samples are different.
Yeah, and you'd need...
I don't know what you'd need. It's not my special subject of interest, and I don't know what you'd need. You'd need to plan a study scientifically to do it.
Well,
and you'd need to do it over years. You wouldn't be able to do it in 5 minutes.
So one of the answers you might get, if you'd need to craft a study over years, it might take a lot of detailed research. One of the answers that you might get after a request for research is, you're right, this study is important, will take years, we'll get started. But that isn't what you got from the department, is it?
No.
And if a study would potentially take years to work out the link between, in this case, repeated exposure to the concussion from artillery in the service of the Australian military, and if that is causing significant brain injuries to veterans, well then the research might be absolutely critical for them getting treatment, potentially some a further body of studies, so as they might be able to take some prevention action. Like this is a potentially this is a very, very serious injury.
What is a very, very serious injury?
Dementia pugilistica, where you're because of repeated concussions to your brain, you can suffer incredibly debilitating outcomes. Perhaps if I'm wrong in that.
That's not in question. Repeated concussions can do that. What's in question is whether repeated, much more minor exposures can do it.
Well, the repeated concussion from being in the proximity of a 155mm artillery piece, which is not a minor concussion, but it's less than...
No, it's not, and it's not what we were thinking about, because I agree with you. I mean, it's the more minor exposures that are, in question.
So is there a body of evidence that says, that you can rely upon, that says repeated exposure to the concussion from 155mm artillery shells being fired can produce dementia pugilistica or chronic repetitive blast injury?
I don't know. I can't remember. I wasn't the lead professor on this one, and it was some time ago. But I can easily find out for you.
But if that... Well, when you speak of low-level blast exposure, sorry, if you could take that on notice, that would be helpful.
Yeah, sure.
When you speak of low-level blast exposure, what kind of exposure are you talking about?
Firing rifles.
Yep.
That sort of thing.
Right.
That most school kids did in my day anyway.
Yes,
and to try and separate out, that from the natural prevalence of chronic, ultimately leading to dementia, but declining cognition and so forth, is next to impossible. That's the problem.
Well,
in terms of cause and effect.
Yeah. Well, Professor, schoolboys in your era may have fired 303s.
They
on
did.
Occasion in cadets.
I was one of them.
Yes. But I would suggest to you that full-time infantry in the Australian Defence Force fire guns more often and of a potentially significantly greater power. I don't think they're comparable. Full-time service in the ADF as a member of an infantry battalion and cadets. I don't think they're comparable, and you're not suggesting they are you?
Well, no, I'm not. I'm just suggesting that it's not going to be a black and white division between a level of exposure and another level of exposure where these people get into trouble and those people don't. There's going to be a linear relationship.
Well, was there any effort from the department to say, well, we're looking into this? We're seeing whether or not we could create a study?
You've seen what the department wrote back to me. Well,
they have said the US is doing something. We're going to wait to see what happens with the US. and there's a pool of money in some other part of the department that they're pitching to maybe potentially do some research here. That's what they said, wasn't it?
Yep.
So if there is, the second part of it really sort of outs the reality, isn't it? If they say that there's another pool of money which can be accessed to undertake the research and we're trying to get it out of that other pool of money, it seems to suggest they could craft a study. It seems to suggest it is achievable to do it, because why else are they asking for it to be funded by that other pool of money?
You'd have to ask them, I don't know. But we would point out that if the Americans are doing it and have been doing it for some time and they have slightly larger numbers than we do, us trying to chase them is fruitless. We'd be better off waiting for the Americans to do it with the numbers they've got.
Well, have you followed up where the US is on their study?
No, that's not my job.
Did you, when the Repatriation Medical Authority wrote its statement of reasons, was it in October of last year? Did you access the most recent US study? Did you find out before that was published where the US studies were up to?
Oh, I'm sure we did. I didn't write the statement of reasons.
Well, can you take that on notice?
Yes, of course.
Did you ask the department to provide if they had any updates on where the US study was up to?
Yes.
What did they do? Did they provide any?
I didn't get anything.
Well,
you don't usually get... I mean, this is an ongoing study. It's not like they're looking at it every day. I don't know what the design of the study is, but at some point they'll be collecting their data and making decisions. They don't... It's not like it's going to come out on a daily basis or something.
Well, I'm not suggesting it comes out, but when there are lengthy longitudinal
study.
When there are lengthy longitudinal studies, it's quite common for interim findings to be put out, for data to be released at different milestones.
Yes.
Did you ask about any of that?
I can't remember.
Can you take it on notice?
Yeah, sure.
Were you provided with any of that before the statement of reasons was issued?
I don't remember.
Could you take it on notice?
Yes.
And Professor, you say that there's insufficient numbers inside the Defence Force to... That was your initial proposition. We don't have the numbers to do this kind of study. I put it to you that there are thousands of people in the artillery units, but there would be tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of veterans who have served in infantry units in Australia who would still be alive. Yep. I'm going to test your first answer that there wouldn't be sufficient population to do the study from. Do you have a basis upon which to say there wouldn't be a sufficient population in Australia to do the study from?
Not really, because I don't exactly know what study. I've said a couple of times, this, I was not the lead professor on this one, and it was some time ago.
Well, Professor, it's best if your answers are given based upon what you know, and you can back them up with some facts or some specialised learning, rather than just respond as you did off the cuff at the beginning of this exchange.
Senator, I think the witness has tried to be as helpful as he can. He's taken, obviously, some questions on notice and happy to come back to you on notice.
The Repatriation Medical Authority went down this path to see whether or not there was a link between military service and dementia pugilistica or CTE, because it's a matter of very great concern to the veterans community at the moment, isn't it? You have to verbalise your answers. Sorry, Professor.
Yes.
It remains a matter of very real concern to the veterans community, doesn't it?
It does.
And yet, despite your request to the department to commence research in it, they've refused to. That's the situation, isn't it?
Well, I haven't done it.
Well, are you trying to take some issue with my proposition that they've refused to?
No.
Minister, why isn't your government undertaking the study, the primary research that's been requested from the Repatriation Medical Authority into CTE to deal with these very real concerns in the veterans community? Why did you say no?
I think that this has been canvassed in previous estimates, but a number of things are occurring in relation to the relationship between low-level blast overpressure and traumatic brain injuries. They include the commissioning from UNSW to undertake a literature review of all of the established literature over the past 5 years. That first report has now been published by the department, and this is a rolling project. There will be further literature reviews. I do understand that the department's reasoning, and I suspect it's set out in the letter, although I can't be certain about this.
We had a conversation earlier about your time.
Yeah, okay, sorry. So, I think the issue is, as set out in the letter, that a large-scale study is underway in the United States with a large population, and that any additional research should be additive rather than repeating a study that is already underway at scale. There is funding available. There is a new set of projects underway that, amongst other things, is examining what other further research might be necessary to better support veterans in this area.
They're my questions, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Professor. Have a good night, and we'll follow up with any questions that were taken on notice. We'll be back. Sure. Okay. Now we need to hurry up because we've got to get to Defence Housing Australia, and we've only got about maybe 7 minutes or 6 minutes with them before the Minister has to head back to the chamber.
3 minutes.
Or 5 minutes. All right, so have we got Defence Housing Australia here? Hello? We're going to suspend. Okay, we're back online. We probably only have a couple of minutes, so we'll be very quick. It's good to now welcome Defence Housing Australia, Ms Barlin, who's the Acting Managing Director. Good evening.
Good evening, Senator.
Did you have an opening statement?
I did not.
Excellent, good question, good answer to the question. Now, Senator Shoebridge, you've got a few minutes.
Yeah. I have got a bunch of questions here about the amount of housing being provided to US troops and foreign contractors, largely around in WA. We could go through the process of me asking you a series of questions, but perhaps you might just sort of give a summary at the outset about how many US troops, how many family members, how many housing units.
Thank you, Senator. I might pass to Mr West to answer those questions.
Thank you, Senator. Shane West, Executive General Manager, DHA. So at the moment we work with Defence to get their forecasts of US and other foreign military arrivals into the country. We're working on there being between 11 and 1,200 in total over the next 5 or so years, and approximately half of them are expected to be families, and the other half single or unaccompanied members.
All right. So that's 1,100 to 1,200 US personnel?
Yep.
And half will come with families and half won't, is the expectation?
That's the planning assumption.
Do you know how many housing units are currently being built to deal with that cohort, or have been built to deal with that cohort?
We're working to deliver the demand, but there's currently no US personnel in a DHA provided house at the moment, so it's all future looking, dependent upon when they turn up and the number of houses that are required.
But houses don't just turn up.
No.
That's my experience. They require some planning, approval and building. Are you in the planning, approving and building process?
Yes, but we also lease properties. The majority of the properties in the portfolio in Rockingham are leased properties, so not ones that we build ourselves.
Yeah. So how many are you in the process of building then, or planning to build for US personnel?
At the moment, in Rockingham, we're not in the process of building any properties for the US.
So the intention at the moment then is to lease from the existing housing stock in Rockingham, is that right?
It's to lease, but it's not necessarily from the existing housing stock. So the majority of the properties that we bring into the portfolio in Rockingham at the moment are houses that an investor has bought as a house and land package. So the property is in the process of being built, but we will lease it upon completion of it being built. We're not building it ourselves, though.
I think, Mr West, it may be helpful to explain to Senator Shearer-Bridge about the new build volume leasing program, because I think that's a significant feature of the Surf West project, right?
Can we just keep a focus on WA though, because we have such a short amount of time?
It is the main tool in WA.
Yeah, that's correct. So how that program works is we work with a number of Western Australian-based builders and developers to work with them so that when they market a property or a house and land package for sale to an investor, that we know that that property meets the requirements of the ADF or US personnel, and then it is sold with a lease attached to it. So upon completion, it's leased by the department.
And you gave numbers for personnel. Do you have separate numbers for foreign arms companies, the personnel for the contractors?
No, we don't.
It's part of what the legislation permitted Defence Housing to provide. Is that going to be a separate body of work?
At the moment, we don't have any demand forecast for anything other than foreign military personnel.
Are you aware that the US National Defence Authorisation Act for fiscal year 2026 made the claim that there were currently inadequate resources and facilities for United States staffing and facilities in Western Australia? Or of those concerns that are now in legislation in the United States?
I wasn't aware of that, no.
Have you undertaken any studies as to what, if any, impacts providing this level of housing to US personnel will have on the cost of housing and the housing market in or around HMAS Stirling?
We haven't undertaken any studies as such, but we are conscious of the presence in the region, and it's a relatively small component of the overall.
What proportion of new builds in the immediate surround would this take?
I'd need to take that on notice, Senator, but it would be less than 10%.
Okay. We'll have to do this again in May and put more notice on, no doubt. Thanks, everyone. We do have to conclude today's proceedings. I've already outlined the dates earlier on in my spiel when we kicked off at 6:30. Can I thank Minister McAllister, all the officers of the departments and agencies who have given evidence today, and thank Hansard Broadcasting Secretariat. I declare the hearing closed.